Welcome, class. Go ahead and grab a seat, get your notebooks out, and let's get settled. We're going to bypass the dry dates and predictable timelines today, and instead, we are diving headfirst into the absolutely fascinating extremes of the human experience. Why? Well, because looking at the bizarre, the brutal, and the brilliant actually teaches us far more about the baseline of human nature than the ordinary ever could. By pushing to the absolute edges of history, we see exactly what humanity is capable of when driven by fear, innovation, or sheer determination. So let's just dive right into this, because today we are covering everything from ancient curses to exploding chocolate bars.
Here is the syllabus for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with the strange and macabre, move into the rapid innovations forged in the crucible of war, celebrate some incredible unsung pioneers, and finally, we'll look at one single chaotic day across the centuries.
All right, Module 1, the macabre and the bizarre, deadly plots and dangerous fashion. Let's get weird. I want to start by having you all ponder this question about ancient revenge tactics. You know, when we picture ancient Roman Greece, we usually imagine pristine white marble, grand aqueducts, and Stoic philosophy, right? Well, the primary sources show us a totally different side. Everyday people were actually using dark magic to doom their enemies. They literally carved their hatred into these thin sheets of lead, known as curse tablets or defixiones. If a rival chariot faction was winning too much, or maybe a business competitor opened a shop across the street, a Roman citizen wouldn't just complain. No way. They would hire a sorcerer to inscribe a highly specific curse, demanding the gods of the underworld bind, paralyze, or utterly destroy their rival. Then, they'd bury these tablets in graves or toss them down wells. It was widespread, it was petty, and it was incredibly personal. Okay, moving from petty ancient revenge to industrial-era terror, we find H.H. Holmes. The juxtaposition here is what makes this so incredibly chilling. In 1893, the eyes of the entire world were on the gleaming, joyous, beautifully lit Chicago World's Fair. It was this massive celebration of human progress. Yet, just blocks away from all that light, Holmes constructed a massive, labyrinth-like lair that the press later dubbed the Murder Castle. He used the massive influx of tourists flocking to the city as a cover for his gruesome deception. This building was literally outfitted with soundproof bank vaults, secret passages, and grease chutes leading directly to a basement kiln. The records allege he may have killed as many as 200 people right under the noses of a celebrating city, just hiding pure darkness in the shadow of absolute brilliance. And honestly, if a murder castle wasn't scary enough, just getting dressed back then could be completely lethal. The pursuit of the perfect look pushed people to surprisingly dangerous lengths. In the 19th century, early plastics like celluloid were used to create affordable dentures. The problem? Celluloid was highly flammable. If a wearer took a sip of hot tea while smoking a cigar, their teeth could literally explode right out of their mouth at the dinner table. Then you have these stiff shirt collars designed to be so rigid and high that they could cut off the blood supply to the carotid artery. If a gentleman had one too many drinks and nodded off in his chair, his own collar could asphyxiate him. And of course, toxic hair implants that caused severe infections. The phrase fashion victim used to be a completely literal term. Moving right along, Module 2, the crucible of war, conflict as a catalyst. War destroys, but as historians, we also have to examine how it forces rapid, unpredictable, and sometimes bizarre changes. It's crazy to think about, but a single maritime disaster can completely flip the geopolitical board. Take the sinking of the RMS Lusitania in 1915. This wasn't just a localized tragedy at sea. When a German U-boat torpedoed this British ocean liner, it killed nearly 1,200 people, and that included 128 Americans. Now, at the time, the United States was firmly isolationist. We wanted absolutely nothing to do with the conflict over in Europe. But the sheer brutality of this unprovoked attack shifted American public opinion overnight. It turned a neutral populace fiercely anti-German, and it pulled the U.S. right to the brink of a war that would redefine global power dynamics. Now, if you think espionage is all slick briefcases and microfilms, well, get a load of this. We have an incredibly bizarre, completely foiled assassination plot involving weaponized candy. Nazi intelligence actually drew up sketches outlining a plan to assassinate British Prime Minister Winston Churchill using a bomb disguised as a high-end bar of Peter's chocolate. The mechanics were totally diabolical. It was a steel canvas covered in actual chocolate, designed to detonate exactly 7 seconds after a piece was broken off. The plan was to smuggle it straight into the war cabinet dining room. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a comic book, but it really highlights the surreal, desperate strategy deployed during World War II. Let's define our terms here real quick. Military technology. tools and innovations originally designed for warfare that often transition into everyday civilian use. Conflict doesn't just produce weapons, it sparks everyday innovation. The immense pressure of global conflict forces technological leaps that inevitably find their way into our living rooms and our pockets long after the treaties are signed. In fact, the very device you are using to watch this explainer right now and the internet connecting us trace their direct roots back to Cold War defense communication networks. The crazy thing is, the modern conveniences we completely take for granted today were born out of absolute battlefield necessity. Take superglue, for instance. During World War II, a chemist named Harry Coover was desperately trying to create clear plastic gun sights for Allied soldiers. He experimented with a compound called cyanoacrylate, but he actually discarded it because it was too incredibly sticky. It adhered to absolutely everything it touched. It wasn't until years later that scientists realized this so-called failed military experiment was actually a miraculous commercial adhesive. Okay, let's turn the page to Module 3. Unsung Trailblazers. Diverse figures who shaped the modern world. Here, we are celebrating the incredible, sometimes overlooked pioneers who redefined the rules of the game. Even in the sports world, trailblazers totally shifted the culture over time. Think about soccer. Before the sleek, moisture-wicking, numbered jerseys and shorts we instantly recognize on the pitch today, 19th century players were bound by strict Victorian modesty. They were running around in heavy, restrictive knickerbockers. And because numbers hadn't been standardized yet, teams wore brightly colored caps just to tell each other apart in the mud. It took decades of athletes pushing for better performance gear to transition into the modern uniform we see today. Now, let me throw a huge number at you. 20,000. Fast forward to 1982, where 20,000 Asian American immigrant women flooded the streets of New York City's Chinatown. These women were working in grueling, poorly ventilated sweatshops for incredibly low pay. When contractors tried to slash their wages and benefits even further, these 20,000 women organized a massive, unified strike. By standing together, they didn't just protest. They successfully brought the local garment industry to a complete standstill. They won better workplace conditions, vital benefits, and cemented a historic victory for labor rights in the United States. We also see some truly vast contributions from the ANHPI community across wildly different eras. We've got the incredible Polynesian expert sailors who, using absolutely nothing but star navigation and ocean currents, reached the Americas centuries before Columbus. Then you have Wang Tzu, a brilliant engineer who spent 10 crucial months at Boeing starting back in 1916. He designed their first successful aircraft, the Model C, that essentially kept the company afloat and launched U.S. commercial aviation. And we absolutely cannot forget Duke Kahanamoku, a 5-time Olympic swimming gold medalist who almost single-handedly brought the ancient Hawaiian sport of surfing to global mainstream popularity. Now, consider the profound paradox of the Nisei linguists. These Japanese-American members of the Military Intelligence Service acted as an absolute secret weapon for the United States during World War II. They intercepted Imperial Japanese communications, translated captured battle plans, and interrogated prisoners, saving countless American lives. Yet, they displayed this immense loyalty and skill for a nation that was, simultaneously and unjustly, forcing their own families and communities into internment camps back home. Let's rewind back to the very birth of the nation in 1778. The Continental Army was completely desperate for troops. So, the 1st Rhode Island Regiment was formed, becoming the first predominantly black unit in the Army. Enslaved men were promised their freedom in exchange for surviving the war. The courage of these soldiers fundamentally challenged the social fabric and racial hierarchy of the era, proving their undeniable valor while fighting for a nation's independence that had not yet granted them their own. All right, bringing it home with our final module today, This Day in History, May 7th across the eras. Get your pens ready, class, because the absolute chaos of history is perfectly captured by this one single calendar day, May 7th. It's like a giant puzzle. On May 7, 1824, the world is gifted the transcendent debut of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 in Vienna. Fast forward to May 7, 1896, and the architect of that terrifying murder castle, H.H. Holmes, meets his end on the gallows in Philadelphia. Jump ahead to 1984, and a massive settlement is reached regarding the chemical weapon Agent Orange. And exactly 10 years later, on May 7, 1994, the stolen artistic masterpiece, Edvard Munch's The Scream, is finally recovered by police in a sting operation. Unrivaled art, brutal justice, and the echoes of war, all sharing a single square on the calendar. Just zooming in on that 1984 event for a second, that's a $180 million settlement.
This was reached for Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange, a chemical defoliant used extensively during the conflict. The class action lawsuit was a monumental legal event, and this figure stands as a stark numerical record of the devastating, highly complex, and long-lasting aftermath that follows global conflicts.
As our seminar winds down today, I want you to really sit with this profound quote from John Adams. We've seen the absolute darkest deception today, right? From ancient curses carved in lead to serial killers hiding behind the joy of a World's Fair and exploding chocolates meant to kill heads of state. But we have also seen incredible courage from marginalized groups striking for their rights and groundbreaking innovators who mapped the stars and took to the skies. If we only look at the dark, we completely miss the brilliant light of human progress.
So here's my final question for you. Knowing all these bizarre, brutal, and brilliant facts of our past, how will you scrutinize the history being made today? History is not a static list of dates trapped in a textbook. It is an ongoing, wildly unpredictable cycle that you are living in right now. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and keep exploring the primary sources of your own lives. Class dismissed. I will see you in the next Explainer.